Dream big, never stop dreaming, because you can do whatever that you want as long as you believe in your dreams.
Welcome to the Dare to Dream Productions podcast. Please welcome writer, director, and post-production supervisor of Broad City and High Maintenance, Amanda Hanna-McLeer. Her piece 9 to 9, featured in the Current Affairs magazine, reveals the exploitative nature of the film industry. I just wanted to say how grateful I am for someone to be finally writing about this. 14-hour work days and just overnights definitely have a negative effect on one's mental health. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, that's something that I've been wanting to write for a really long time. And it's difficult to write something like that while you're working. You don't want to offend anybody. You don't want to rock the boat too much because you know, in this industry especially, that your job security relies on who you know and networking. So when I had written drafts loosely of something like this in the past on particularly bad jobs. And then when the pandemic hit, I thought, I have no one that I'm accountable to right now. And this is the perfect time. And especially because, I had a feeling with the pandemic that we'd be asked to do things that were not safe, because I'd been asked to do them in the past. I've been asked to overwork myself and give up personal time for my job. And with a pandemic, that can only be exacerbated. So I felt it was really crucial to get it out at the time that I did.
Yeah, I definitely think this is the perfect time because people are also inside and not doing anything. So they have time to read this and actually think about what they're doing in the film industry.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it was. And I had actually written it very early in the pandemic, I believe in April, and I had been pitching it, sending it out to people, and it didn't get, notice in Current Affairs until June. But even then, it was still timely. There were some things I had to adjust, but, we were seeing, as I mentioned in the article, that film crews and film workers were being used as guinea pigs for how to go back to work. And that's unacceptable to me. But it is very true. It was the perfect time to start talking about it and think about it and reflect on it. I had coworkers who were always very career driven, and I am myself, very driven, but I also would try and steal people away for lunch and say, I live in New York City, so I'd say, let's go to Bryant Park for lunch. Get away from your desk. That is so unhealthy. And some people were really hard to convince, but when all of this happened, those same people reached out to me and said, oh my gosh, I've completely realigned all my priorities. And I'm so glad I'm seeing what I was missing out on when I was working those 12, 14-hour shifts.
So you discussed in your article being overworked for someone else's enjoyment was normal before the pandemic. It's crazy. Do you think executives and showrunners of shows will change their perspective on these horrendous conditions after the pandemic?
So I would hope that they too benefited from some free time to reconsider their priorities, because they are also overworked. It's this hierarchy. There's the studio, there's the showrunners, and everyone's trying to and has to answer to somebody else. So it can be difficult, especially when timetables are crunched, and with our short attention spans and the prevalence of fast media, everyone wants to get things out really quickly. I think it's more likely, though, in order to change things, is for the working class of the film industry, the people that represent most of the industry, that keep it running, like myself and my colleagues, that if we set the standards with the help of unions, but also with the solidarity and letting each other know that this is no longer acceptable, communicating with one another, and then putting the pressure on our employers to do that. Because I think it's really hard to wait around and expect somebody who's not, on the ground with you every day, or with you in your apartment when you're waking up at 9 a.m. and answering emails on your phone, or with you in those late nights. It's really hard to convince them that things need to change. Also considering that people who are higher up have been in the industry for a really long time, and they're accustomed to the way things are. And they don't really have any incentive to change it because they've benefited from it. So it's challenging to get them to shift. And that's the thing that's really important to remember, because there is this yearning to go back to quote unquote normal. Because it's a very scary time for a lot of people. They're either unemployed or they're working in conditions that are not ideal. So you'll yearn for that normalcy, but it wasn't really normal before. Normal wasn't really working. So I'm hoping that even as we try and move past this, as hopefully we can, that the pandemic's, all the effects of the pandemic subside. But hopefully we can get past it. But I hope when we do get past it, that there's people remember that they enjoyed spending more time with their family, or finding, like I said in the article, hobbies to rehabilitate or to, find new ones. I hope people will strive for a better work-life balance.
What do you think us as filmmakers could do about this?
So the big thing that I'm working on right now is unionizing. If you are not part of a union, try and look into ways to unionize. It's really essential. Our labor movement has been gutted for the past few generations. You can date it all the way back to the Red Scare and the blacklists. And I think it's important to find community and reach out and talk to people, because one of the issues I had when I was working on these shows and I was working crazy hours is you feel pretty lonely, and you just assume that everyone else is doing it and that you're the only one that is having an issue with it. But once I started talking to people, it was miraculous. I talked to other supervisors like myself, and they were feeling the exact same way. And not only was I had an outlet to vent, but I also had another person to go, hey, I'm getting paid this on this show. That doesn't seem right. What are you getting paid? And they're like, yeah, that isn't cool. I'm getting paid this. So it's about sharing that information and not creating this culture of fear or nervousness about pay transparency. We have to be transparent about what we're getting paid in order to move forward and to demand better rates and conditions, because if we don't, we're just kind of in the dark and we think what we're going through is acceptable. So that's a huge thing, just community building and talking. And weirdly, social media has been really wonderful in getting me to connect with people who are not just in my inner circle in New York, but all over the country. So I think that's the biggest thing. Just talk to your fellow humans.
I definitely agree with that, because I also think there's a lot of inequality with women getting paid, inequality paid versus men too, in the film industry.
Absolutely, big time. And it's definitely, an issue that, especially in post, I mentioned this in the article as well, a lot of the administrative positions are filled by women. So it's a bunch of women who have been taught to just, accept what they've been given, not question it too much. But there's also power in that kind of, sisterhood that you can have. And I've seen that on several shows. And it's really important. But again, it also issues of pay, pay disparities affects everybody. I've talked to several coordinators and supervisors that when I asked how much you're being paid, we're being paid way under what I thought they were on major network shows. And so it really affects everybody.
Another important thing you brought up is that most filmmakers are non-union, meaning we have zero benefits, but we have longer hours, which we don't get paid overtime for. What do you think is the solution to this?
So like I said, I think people should go and see if there has been union efforts in the past for their specific role, and look if they can start up one. And I think in the meantime, if you are not unionized, you have to start advocating for yourself and also advocating for your colleagues. I think when you advocate for yourself, I had an interview recently and I asked for the rate that I thought I deserved, and it was more than I've gotten in the past. But when you start negotiating that way, that means you're setting the bar higher for the next person that comes up for that job interview. And if you're then, transparent with your colleague if they're going in for that interview. It's like, this is what I asked for, this is what you need to do. So there's plenty of things that we can do even without a union to protect ourselves. And I think, for example, with post supervisors, we typically have 60-hour weeks, which is insane. It makes no sense to me. You're supposed to have like a 40-hour week. How are we at 60? And the thing I've learned recently is that that's not required. I can negotiate that when I go into an interview. I can say, what are the hourly requirements? They can say 60, and I can say, well, that's cool. I want 50. And even 50 is 10 hours above, the 40-hour week we're supposed to have. So knowing things like that, educating yourself on labor movements, on, the history of them and what has happened since then. And also too, a union is wonderful, but people find loopholes around a union. I'm fighting for one now, but I've seen abuses on union sets. So it's really important to, if you have a union, to use it, and to also make it, make sure that your voice is heard within your union, and to have, backbone in asserting those things. It can be hard because, again, like I mentioned earlier, this is an industry that you get your job based on how well you do on your last one. And you have to network in order to know the right people. So you never really want to cause too much of an issue, but you have to. And you have to do it for yourself, but then also think of yourself in a larger community.
So where does one begin about joining a union?
Mm-hmm. So, and that's the thing too, as I mentioned, there are people that have been in the industry a really long time that are not union. There are editors that are fighting to be part of the Motion Picture Editors Guild. And it can be really hard if you don't have those contacts to get on a union show. I mean, some shows I've heard in the past, they flip union, and then, the people that get into the union that way are extremely lucky. It rarely happens. Otherwise, it's connecting to the right people. But it can be really challenging. But for myself, at least, I can speak to post supervisors don't have a union. So when I wrote the article, it was one of the things I called for, that we need to be unionized. There were some options. You can either create your own union that is unaffiliated, but that's really challenging. It's a lot of work. Or you can look into an existing union and say, would their union benefit from my membership? And how closely aligned are my duties and responsibilities with this union? And for my role, I oversee editors and assistant editors. Like I couldn't do my job without them, and they couldn't do their job without me. So I had to think about that when I was thinking about appealing to the Motion Picture Editors Guild. And for me, that made sense to start this effort and appeal to them. That isn't always the case depending on what you're doing in the industry. But in that case, it worked, or, it's in the process right now. So it made the most sense to do it that way.
That's so exciting, though. Like, you really are starting change, and I just want to congratulate you on that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, it's all an uphill battle. It takes a long time. That's the other thing for organizing. Everyone should know that it takes a really long time. And, efforts you don't know how they're going to go off, at the beginning of it. So we're appealing to the Motion Picture Editors Guild. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, it just felt, as I mentioned earlier, just really important to do at this specific time, because no one's going to advocate for us. We kind of have to start advocating for ourselves so that maybe someone can take on our cause,
So what can filmmakers do if they are experiencing burnout, or what are healthy ways to deal with stress?
Sure, yeah. I've run the gamut of trying to find the answer for that over the past couple of years. For me, it's, exercising. That is huge. You're stuck, for posts in particular, but in a lot of jobs in the industry, you're stuck behind a computer all day. You're staring at the same thing. You need to take breaks. So if there is no, if people don't take a break for lunch, that's the first thing that they can do. If someone's working right now and they're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, take the break for lunch, leave the office. There's this culture too of some shows I've been on where everyone sits together and eats lunch together in the office still. And that boggles my mind because everyone just starts talking about the show and the job. And then lunch breaks and you're back at the job. So it's not even a break. Like, you're entitled to that time, whether it's 45 minutes, whether it's an hour. You need to give yourself that break. You are not accountable to anyone in that time. So you can do whatever you'd like. That's huge. Green space, getting in some green space at a park, anything, super important also. As I mentioned, I think at the top, I don't know if it was before we were recording, but I would drag my coworkers to Bryant Park and say, just sit for a second. And it was so funny because some would just, some were with it and others would check their phone, just terrified that they'd miss some email, some call from someone. And it's like, if you can't take this hour when we're working all day, like, what are you doing? So lunch, breaks, also putting your foot down when you're not getting paid to do extra work. Don't do the extra work. I was talking to someone recently, a production assistant who's also a coordinator, who's doing 2 roles for 1 rate, which is obscene. And they're working on the weekends without getting paid. And it's so common that happens, but it's unacceptable. And I was telling them, don't do the weekend work. You get an email, ignore it. And that's what I did. I would get emails on the weekend all the time, and I would ignore them because that's not their time. This is my time, especially when so much of my time is taken throughout the week. And I explained to this person that despite doing that, and despite setting those boundaries on the weekends, at a minimum, I was still asked back to shows. I still was able to secure jobs on primetime television. So it's not something that it is really going to threaten your future work opportunities. But the same goes for the weekday. Like, it's unacceptable that we're going home and still sending emails up until like the middle of the night. Or that anyone would expect that of us. On some shows, I'm in my room right now. I would wake up right here, and before I even got out of bed, I would open my email because there was some urgent thing that I need to, resolve before I even got up and brushed my teeth, which is just, that's not a life. We can't do it. So that's something that people, going back to, what we can do, put your foot down. Don't work when you're not getting paid.
I think that's so important.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it seems like obviously I wouldn't work and not get paid, but it happens so much, and especially for people that are starting out in the industry and eager to please and get their foot in the door. It's tough.
I read that your primary goal is to become a director. So we need more female directors in the industry, of course. So what's next for you?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think the figure is something around like 8% of like the top grossing films are led by women directors, which is crazy. And that's the thing. It's like, as much as these companies say that they're committed, or these productions are committed to hiring female filmmakers, I don't know how they deliver. They don't always deliver on that. And it's challenging to get your foot in the door and get recognized. But some of the things I've done is I made a film, Brighton, that we had discussed earlier. I fit that into a 2-week span where I had some free time in between post jobs, writing on the weekends. And that's the thing. You need that time on the weekends to do your thing, because it's like, post was just my job. I saw it as just a job. My real focus was directing and writing. So yeah, just fitting in that time is really essential. But yeah, I made Brighton. I am pitching a series right now that I wrote, a 10-episode series I'm very excited about, which I was accepted to IFP in 2019 for, which is IFP is an independent filmmakers project. And it's like a speed dating for filmmakers where you can pitch your project to producers in the industry. So that I'm working on that, but the pandemic, of course, kind of like throws a lot of that stuff, and it's trying to kind of find my footing again with that. But yeah, just finding work when I can, writing, because I don't need a full film crew for that, so that's really nice. And last year I had a really wonderful experience I'm on some New York filmmakers group for women, and someone had posted about a project that was being shot in Amsterdam and New York. And I was like, oh, this is surely fake. There's no way this is real, but I'll apply to it anyway. And it ended up being a very real project. And I was able to direct. It was my first time directing anything episodic. It was a web series, and flew out to Amsterdam. And we flew back to New York. I got to work with Curtin from Orange is the New Black, which was really, really cool. So I try and find directing opportunities whenever I can. They're really hard to come by. It was the first project that I hadn't, paid for myself or written myself, and put, all that producing time into, that's why it was a really interesting experience. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
That's awesome. I'm glad groups like that exist too.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, it was, like I said, when I first saw it, I was like, this is fake. There's no way someone is gonna, fly me out to Amsterdam to shoot this thing. But it was very real. And, those opportunities don't come by that often. So I do hope that we can pave the way for more opportunities like that. But it can be challenging.
Read Amanda's article. The link will be in the description below. Where can people find you?
Oh, so I'm on Instagram. I actually post quite a bit about the union effort on there and community building. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, please DM me. I'm also on Twitter, but I only just started getting on that. So Instagram, my email is on my website, my portfolio website, which is just my name, Amanda Hanna-McLeer. If you're going through anything, if you're having a tough time at work, or you feel like you're being exploited at work or anything, please reach out to me. I'm just very open to talking about that kind of stuff and figuring out a way to help you, take more control over your workplace.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.